superiority will not entirely protect us. Americans will likely die on American soil, possibly in large numbers. Americans will likely die on American soil, possibly in large numbers. Possibly in large numbers. Possibly in large numbers.
Shortly after September 11th, witnesses came forward documenting that bin Laden had actually met and planned the September 11th attacks with the CIA for 10 days in Dubai in an American Army hospital. French intelligence was so upset by what they had learned that they actually got media reports published before September 11th, specifically warning that bin Laden was planning to hijack aircraft and fly them into tall buildings in downtown Manhattan, as well as the Pentagon. Of course, the Pentagon, the Defense Department, didn't need to be warned. First media reports that came out said that 5 of the hijackers had been trained at the Pensacola Naval Air Station. Later media reports in the Pensacola News Journal confirmed that 3 of the hijackers had been trained at the Pensacola Naval Air Station 2 years before September 11th. The San Francisco Chronicle also reported that one of the top lieutenants of Al-Qaeda was actually an FBI asset, not to mention a member of the U.S. Army. The next piece of evidence you're about to see is the biggest smoking gun of them all. President George W. Bush signed Presidential Decision Directive W199I, telling FBI agents as well as defense intelligence officers that if they tried to stop Al-Qaeda, they would be arrested under national security implications. It's been in every publication from the Wall Street Journal to the Washington Times. Actual lawsuits have now been filed by FBI agents who are outraged by the fact that they were not allowed to stop Al-Qaeda. The global crime syndicate that George W. Bush and his family fronts for has everything to gain from the September 11th attacks: a national ID card, a national control grid, a cashless society. It's part of the public record. George Bush signed the documents threatening defense intelligence and FBI agents with arrest if they stopped Al-Qaeda. This is the most absolutely treasonous, treacherous thing he could possibly do. George Bush is a mass murderer. Before the Bush administration shut him down, CNN's American Morning with Paula Zahn actually reported that FBI Deputy Director John O'Neill resigned because he felt the U.S. administration was obstructing the FBI and their attempt to stop Al-Qaeda. They went on to report that Bush signed W199I, restricting the investigation. Again, this is high treason, absolute fact. George Bush signed this public document. BBC has a copy of it, and George Bush is an intimate partner with bin Laden, a traitor to America. Months before September 11, 2001, Indian as well as Pakistani diplomats had gone public with the fact that U.S. Special Forces were massing in Tajikistan, preparing for a full-scale invasion of Afghanistan. So the U.S. government was massing troops outside Afghanistan, publicly getting ready for an invasion right before September 11th. Another smoking gun, another red flag. We already talked about the Deputy FBI Director, John O'Neill, quitting because George Bush signed an order not allowing him to stop Al-Qaeda. You're probably wondering, why doesn't he go public now? Well, there's a problem. Mr. O'Neill is dead. His new job was working as the head of security for the World Trade Center complex, and he died in the collapse of September 11th, his first day on the job. The Bush and bin Laden family connection goes back over half a century. And by the 1970s, George Bush Jr. as well as Osama bin Laden and his big brother were already vacationing together, owning airports as well as oil companies together. Even before September 11th, the Wall Street Journal had called for the Bush family to end their relationship with the bin Ladens. Then, of course, there's the Carlyle Group, the biggest defense contractor on the planet. And guess who the majority owners are? The Bush family and the bin Ladens. They could profit in the hundreds of billions off of this new war. Now you begin to understand what's fueling these criminal activities. Money and power. Dozens of respected publications have asked a simple question: what brought those buildings down? Especially Building 7 that wasn't even hit by an aircraft. Lou Caccioli, a 51-year-old firefighter in New York who was trapped inside the building, reported that multiple bombs were going off all around him. There are other eyewitnesses, former military munitions experts and police officers, as well as structural engineers. The oldest firefighting magazine in the country was absolutely outraged, demanding a real investigation. According to their evidence, there's no way that aircraft could have brought down those buildings. And don't forget Building 7. Nothing hit Building 7, but still it collapsed in a symmetrical theatrical fashion. The September 12, 2001 San Francisco Chronicle reported that Mayor Willie Brown was warned by the federal government not to fly on September 11th. He was warned the evening before. Now, of course, under pressure from the White House, Willie Brown refuses to say exactly what federal agency warned him, just that he was warned not to fly on September 11th. I wish the rest of the American people would have gotten that warning. But, of course, if the American people would have been warned, then the government terrorist attack wouldn't have had its desired effect, to have the people begging for a nightmare global police state. On September 3rd, Salman Rushdie, author of the Satanic Verses, got a warning from the U.S. authorities not to fly. They went so far as to ban him publicly from flying, and the FAA admits they did it on the record. More chilling evidence of the U.S. government's prior knowledge. But you're saying, hey, wait a minute, what was that whole war about? We went in there and took out the Taliban. No, they escorted a couple hundred goat herders to torture them publicly at Camp X-Ray in Guantanamo Bay. The real leadership of al-Qaeda and Taliban, the few that were left in Afghanistan when the war started, were flown out to safety and paid in gold bars in Pakistan by the U.S. federal government. Here's George Bush at the United Nations telling the people not to tolerate anyone that investigates these facts.
Let us never tolerate outrageous conspiracy theories concerning the attacks of September the 11th, malicious lies that attempt to shift the blame away from the terrorists themselves, away from the guilty.
I guess it's un-American to investigate the facts. Let's just call it a conspiracy theory, especially those FBI agents that have gone public about George Bush telling him not to stop al-Qaeda.
Conspiracy theories, conspiracy theories.
Conspiracy theories.
What you're about to hear is not a Freudian slip. It's a carefully crafted speech as Bush throws it in your face about dark cults of evil gaining power off of human suffering.
The hijackers were instruments of evil who died in vain. Behind them is a cult of evil which seeks to harm the innocent and thrives on human suffering. Theirs is the worst kind of cruelty. The cruelty that is fed, not weakened, by tears. Theirs is the worst kind of violence. Pure malice while daring to claim the authority of God. We cannot fully understand the designs and power of evil. It is enough to know that evil, like goodness, exists. And in the terrorist, evil has found a willing servant. Evil has found a willing servant.
Evil has found a willing servant.
5 months before September 11th, David Shippers, the man that impeached Bill Clinton, that brought down the mob in Chicago, was actually getting investigative reporters on the O'Reilly factor warning of an impending terror attack on Lower Manhattan. We'll take you now to an exclusive interview with David Shippers from my syndicated radio broadcast.
I began to get information concerning the Middle Eastern connection in Oklahoma City. And
we've had Colonel Craig Roberts, who was a detective working the case, on this show many times, a month before the attack, predicting one was imminent, right here on this show. And he has all that same information. They actually arrested some of these guys, and the Justice Department in 95 said release them.
That's right. And the word's out right even today that they're not allowed to touch them. The Oklahoma City police are not allowed to touch these people. And again, from what I'm understanding, they're up to something again in Oklahoma City. I don't know what it is or what their target is. But these same people are at it again.
Now, later you got it from FBI agents in Chicago and Minnesota that there was going to be an attack on Lower Manhattan.
Everybody, yeah. I mean, it's everybody, and that's what started me calling. I started calling out there. First of all, I tried to see if I could get a congressman to go to bat for me and at least bring these people out there and listen to them. I sent them information, and nobody cared. It was always, we'll get back to you, we'll get back to you, we'll get back to you. Then I reached out and tried to get to the Attorney General when finally we got an Attorney General in there that I would be willing to talk to. And again, I used people who were personal friends of John Ashcroft to try and get him. One of them called me back and said, all right, I've talked to him, he will call you tomorrow morning. This was like a month before the bombing. The next morning I got a call. It wasn't from Ashcroft, it was from somebody in the Justice Department.
One of his handlers.
Yeah, and I started telling him the situation. He said, well, we don't start our investigations at the top. I said, I'd like to talk to the Attorney General because this is vital. And he said, we don't start our investigations at the top. Let me look into this, and I'll get back to you. Well, as